Brows can make or break your look, so imagine achieving brows so natural and precise that they look professionally microbladed, all from a single affordable brow pen. I spotted this on TikTok, so naturally I had to buy it to see what it was like. This is the Fine Strokes brow pen. This has the finest nib I've ever come across. It's also a dual-ended pen, and although the 4-stroke design is not something new to the market, the finish of this one is very different. The actual prongs themselves are made of very superfine soft hairs, whereas the ones we've seen on the market before are pretty hard, like cardboard, and the tips themselves were rounded, so not very precise. I'm giving you a comparison of how fine this tip is. I absolutely adore the Urban Decay brow blade. I have done since its launch, but the Fine Strokes is definitely half the size. And as you can see with the brow blade, on the opposite end you have a pencil, which some people prefer so that you have the pen and the pencil, whereas the Fine Strokes has 2 pens, which is more ideal for me because I never reach for the pencil. The brow blade does have a few more shades available than the Fine Strokes. The Fine Strokes only has 6. But the brow blade is around £23 and the Fine Strokes is only £11. My favourite go-to shade in the Urban Decay brow blade is Cool Cookie, which is getting more and more difficult to get here in the UK. They don't offer a comparable shade in the Fine Strokes. The only one that I could find that worked for me was Deep Brown. It works well. It is a little bit warmer than my natural hair colour. However, I just personally prefer the colour of the Cool Cookie. So I'm really hoping that Fine Beauty will bring out a lighter taupe shade. So let's get on with the demonstration. For this brow I'm going to use the thin nib, and then on the opposite brow I'll use the 4 prongs. I like to start at the base and then flick upwards to create hair-like strokes. As you can see, this pen is very pigmented, but I'm going to show you how to make this softer once we've applied a few of the strokes. So this is just defining the base of my brow. Then I like to go in with a spoolie and just keep brushing over it until that pen comes away and leaves a slightly softer, more natural looking finish to the ink. As you can see, it now looks a little bit more in keeping with the colour of my natural brows rather than looking too brown and warm compared to the ashiness that my natural brows have. You'll notice at the front of the brows I flick upwards. As we get towards the middle half of the brow and the arch, the direction of the hair strokes is more of an angle. The reason for this is because I'm following the directions that the hair naturally grow. That way I'm going to get the most natural finish. Once I've flicked up from the base of the brow, I then go to the very top of the brow where the hair here is more sparse. You'll see in the centre of the brow, that's where the hair is fullest naturally. So I don't need to go in and fill this area in. I tend to just fill in the base and the very top where I tend to lack a little bit more volume. The key as you go along is to apply the hair strokes and then comb over them. Really work it onto the skin so that you're only left with some staining of ink rather than obvious line work. We want each hair stroke to be as soft and natural looking as possible. However, you've noticed that the pen is super inky. The initial lay down when you first open the pen can be quite intense, so I would recommend maybe drawing a few hairs onto the back of your hand first so that you're left with a little bit less residual ink in the nib, so that when you go onto your brow hair it is a bit softer. You can see here where my brows are quite sparse in the arch. I'm going over it with tiny little flicks to really build up the colour intensity so it looks like there's more hairs in one area. When it comes to the tail of your eyebrow, the hairs tend to go downwards or slightly across, so depending on which direction your hairs are growing will depend on how you are going to use the brow pen. I tend to come downwards and I do tend to go a bit darker in this area because it's a bit more sparse, but that isn't a problem because I'm really going to comb it in so it doesn't look drawn on. Instead it leaves like a shadow underneath the hairs. I'm not too worried about this part of it looking too hair stroke like. Now I'm just going to go back into the areas that need just a little bit more of a tweak with the brow pen. So the front here just needs a few more fine lines in there, and again each time you apply the pen, comb it in so you get that very natural finish. So here you can see this is the brow filled in using that very fine nib. You can see my other brow as an example of how much fuller it looks, but yet it still looks very natural. Okay, so I'm going to flip the pen around this time and use the prongs on this side. Now this is a great innovation, however I feel like it is a little bit less precise than using the single nib. This is great if you're in a rush because you cover more surface area with each stroke. If you have very sparse brows and you need a bit more volume, because this is going to give you 4 times the amount than the single nib in one stroke. So you'll be able to layer this much quicker and more effectively, but you do need to be a bit more precise with where you place the pen, the angle that you use the pen as well, because if you're slightly off, you're going to get one thick stroke, because all of those very thin hairs are going to clump together because they are soft and very malleable. That if you're at the wrong angle and you're using a heavy hand, you're going to get a very thick stroke. If you use a very light hand like here, for example, I'm using the very tip of those 4 prongs in one stroke, and by using a light hand I'm getting a light payoff. So it is going to take some practice if you're new to this technique. However, for someone like me who's been using these pens for a while, using a very light hand is easy, so I can kind of use the 4 prongs to my advantage, if that makes sense. The beauty about this being dual-ended is that once you've filled it in with the 4 prongs, any areas that you've missed or you need an individual stroke, you can go in with the single nib and use that to tweak the eyebrow that you've filled in using the 4 prongs. So I really like that you have the option of both in this pen. As I mentioned earlier with the Urban Decay Brow Blade, I love the colour, I've always loved the thinness of the tip, it's just that I've never ever used the pencil. So I'm spending £23 and not using half of what I'm paying for each pen, and it feels like a waste, whereas this product, I wouldn't be wasting anything. I just wish and hope that they bring out a colour that's very similar to Cool Cookie. A light taupe would be fantastic. The shade lighter than this one is Auburn, which is completely wrong for my hair colour, and then the shade above this is Deep Taupe, and that's just so dark, it's just too dark for me. And then the next shade after that is Soft Black. So this deep brown shade is the only one I can get to work for me, and I feel like it just takes a little bit longer by really having to brush it in, so it's a lot softer and less warm. For me, a light taupe would be the perfect shade. So here's a little reminder of where my brows started. You can see the natural hair colours a little bit lighter and a little bit ashier, and here we are where they are much fuller. I like the slightly deeper colour, it does work, but again, slightly ashier would be just perfect. Colours aside, I think this is such a winning product. Having the dual-ended side for someone like me is fantastic because I just don't reach for pencils, and I am absolutely so happy about the price point. It's wonderful to have a luxurious product that feels really well made and that isn't going to break the bank. This particular tutorial here is my fluffy brow tutorial, and I will link it on screen for you now if you want to see it, but this is using the Urban Decay Brow Blade in the shade Cool Cookie. Is the Fine Strokes brow pen enough to make me give up my Cool Cookie shade? At the moment, no, but if they brought out a competing colour, I would absolutely 100% swap over, because I do not want to be paying for half of the product that I'm never going to be reaching for. As always, I will list and link everything I've used in the description bar. Let me know in the comments if this is a pen that you feel intrigued to try, or if you've already tried it, I'd love to know your thoughts. Please hit the subscribe button if you are new to my channel. My name is Shonagh Scott. I'm a professional makeup artist and I upload tutorials like this weekly. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys!